When word reached Hastinapur that in Pandu's forest home, Kunti was pregnant with a child of a Dev, Gandhari grew nervous. After all, the eldest born child in the family would inherit the throne of Hastinapur. But Gandhari became pregnant with Dhritarashtra's child soon enough. Her pregnancy, however, was a troubled one. She stayed in bed and suffered great pain. She had nightmares about creatures from hell. The day she gave birth was the saddest day of her life. What emerged from her womb was not a child. It was a large lump of putrid flesh that had no life in it. Gandhari, who had been blessed by Ved Vyas and expected to become the mother of 100 sons, was devastated. In her despair, Gandhari ordered a dasi to take the lump of flesh and cast it into the forest. She did not want to be reminded of her misfortune, much less face it. This was the moment Ved Vyas returned to bring his prophecy to life. He forbade the dasi from harming what had come out of Gandhari. He assured the weeping queen that his word will not be in vain. She will have 100 sons. In a chamber of the Hastinapur palace, Vyas divided the lump into 100 pieces. He got the dasi to prepare 101 vats of oil. In every vat, he immersed one piece of the lump. In these vats, the future of the Kuru clan began to take shape. As Gandhari's children came into being inside those vats, ill omens began to be seen around Hastinapur. When the vats broke and Gandhari beheld her eldest born son, Duryodhan, her blindfold prevented her from seeing what was plainly visible to everyone around her. There was something demonic about her 100 sons. They were sons who could only be loved by a blind father and a mother who had forsaken sight. Dhritarashtra and Gandhari were happy parents with dreams that one day Duryodhan would become king. Into their happy world came Kunti with her 5 sons. The people of Hastinapur welcomed their princes and were happy about the fact that Pandu's sons were alive and well.
The coming of the Pandavas was a terrible blow to Duryodhan. While the 5 sons of Pandu were loved by everyone, Duryodhan found Bhim particularly annoying. It seemed to him he had become grandfather Bhishma's new favorite. Duryodhan felt left out, and his isolation quickly took the form of hatred. In his anger, Duryodhan once made the mistake of challenging Bhim to a wrestling match. Much to his disappointment, he found that he was no match for the Pandavas' might. The fight hurt him both inside and out. He was no longer the center of Hastinapur. In the days that followed, Duryodhan watched in sullen silence as Bhim enjoyed his life in the palace and gathered even more admirers. The hatred in his heart had grown silent, but it had also grown much stronger. It was at this point that Duryodhan's uncle, Queen Gandhari's brother Shakuni, became a mentor to him. He understood the fire that raged in the prince's heart. He told Duryodhan that the Pandavas were pretenders to the throne and they would take Hastinapur from him if he did not destroy them first. Upon Shakuni's advice, Duryodhan organized a lakeside retreat and respectfully invited the Pandavas. His intention was to make the Pandavas lower their guard and unsuspectingly fall into his poisonous trap. The food that Duryodhan served the Pandavas at the retreat was delicious. Bhim in particular ate all he could. What the Pandavas did not know was that Duryodhan had laced the delicacies with sleep-inducing herbs. After having his fill, Bhim decided to take a nap by the lake. He quickly fell into a deep sleep and missed out on the games the other boys were playing near the camp. After sunset, when everyone else had returned to their tents, Duryodhan put the final part of his plan into action. He tied up Bhim's hands and feet before pushing the sleeping Pandav into the lake. As the unconscious Bhim drifted deeper into the water, numberless poisonous serpents of the lake dug their fangs into him. To any mere mortal, those snake bites would have proved fatal. But the son of Vayu woke up instead. He broke the ropes that bound him and grabbed at the attacking snakes to fight them off. The snakes had not anticipated such strength and speed from a mortal. When they persisted, Bhim started killing them off. The situation had reversed now. Instead of attacking the drowning prince, the snakes were now looking to escape him. By the time he was rid of all the snakes, Bhim found himself at a great depth. Though he was in a palace compound, it seemed to him that he was in another world. This world was Naglok, home of the most powerful serpents. Bhim was greeted by Vasuki himself, who was the ruler of this realm. He discovered that Vasuki was related to him through the Nag chief Aryak. Calling him a grandson, Vasuki showered Bhim with love and affection. After letting Bhim feast on the choicest of Naglok delicacies, Vasuki gifted him a magic drink. He promised him that the gifts that this drink bestows upon him will enable him to face and defeat many threats to his and his brothers' lives. Vasuki's magic potion gave Bhim the strength of 1,000 elephants and transformed him into a hero whose fame will echo down the corridors of history. But strength was not all Naglok had given to Bhim. As he swam away from the realm of Vasuki, Bhim was going home with the realization that the time for him to be an innocent little boy was over. For the sake of those he loved, it was time for him to grow up and face the dangers that lurked all around the Pandavas.
When Bhim returned to Hastinapur alone and unharmed, everyone was happy and relieved. Duryodhan, on the other hand, was both unhappy and confused. He distinctly remembered pushing the Pandav to his death. Even Shakuni could not explain Bhim's survival. Since Bhim said he had no recollection of what had happened to him, Duryodhan decided to play along. As time passed, the princes grew into young men. Their grandfather Bhishma realized that in order to become all that they could, the princes will need more than just the wisdom of Kripacharya. They needed a teacher who would teach them mastery of all weapons and the way of war. What Bhishma did not know was that destiny was bringing such a teacher to Hastinapur. One day, when the princes of Hastinapur were playing outdoors, Bhim underestimated his own strength and threw the ball too high, and it landed in a deep well. As they looked down the well with despair, Arjun spied a Brahmin coming towards them. Something about the poor man struck Arjun as being singular and powerful. The Brahmin, who said his name was Dron, looked into the well with them. He smiled. Then he fetched a reed of grass and threw it straight down the well like an arrow. Arjun noted that his aim was perfect even without a bow. The reed struck the ball. Then, Dron threw another reed, and another, and another. Each reed hit the one before it and extended outwards from the well. Eventually, Dron grabbed the last reed and pulled the ball out of the well with the rope that his perfect aim had created. The princes asked the Brahmin if he would pay a visit to their grandfather, the famous Bhishma. Dron replied that indeed was his purpose of visiting Hastinapur. But the boys were only too happy when they saw that Bhishma regarded Dron with respect and embraced him like a brother. Even though they did not know what transpired between the Kaurav grandsire and the Brahmin, they were eager to start becoming the warriors that history needed them to be. Before long, their dreams would come true and Hastinapur would have its new protectors.
Under the expert eye of Dronacharya, the Pandavas began to learn the ways of war. Dronacharya's skill with weapons and techniques of war was rivaled only by his eye for talent. He observed his students closely and recognized their abilities early on. Yudhishthir, for example, proved to be an excellent charioteer. He took to navigating the battlefield like a fish to water and quickly became the best person to have behind the reins. Madri's sons, Nakul and Sahadev, became talented swordsmen and wielded blades better than anyone. Under Drona's watchful eye, they learned how to use their swords to keep many enemies at bay at once. The strongest son of Pandu was Bhim, and it didn't surprise anyone when he chose the mace as his weapon of choice. What surprised them, however, was Bhim's sheer strength in the battlefield. At his best, the boy could overpower even the strongest of adults. But the true surprise was Arjun, who turned out to be the perfect warrior. He wielded all weapons with equal ease and was adept at hand-to-hand combat as well. But the art he chose to excel in was archery. Drona understood the reason. Archery required discipline of the mind. Alone among all of Drona's disciples, Arjun and Drona's son Ashwathama showed enough promise to be taught the use of Devastras, the divine weapons. These are weapons that controlled the elements. Knowledge of them was imparted only to the worthiest of students. The secret behind Drona's passion was revealed the day he took them to the borders of Panchal. Arjun felt a strange tug at his heart when he beheld the faraway palace. But he learned that Drona wanted only one thing from this kingdom: vengeance.
They were out exploring, and one of the dogs they had sent ahead of them started barking. As they followed the sound suddenly ceased. It turned out someone had shut the dog up with arrows, and the way they had done it was a sight to behold. The dog had not been hurt, but its mouth was full of arrows which had been so precisely shot that they were jamming the animal's mouth completely. As everyone marveled at the dog's condition, a single tear rolled down Arjun's cheek. His ambition of becoming the world's greatest archer seemed to be at an end. Whoever this was, he was greater than Arjun. When the Pandavas sought out the archer who had displayed such great skill, they found Eklavya, a Nishad boy. He was no warrior, but a mere hunter. He was the prince of no kingdom. He was not even a Kshatriya. When Eklavya found out that he was before the princes of Hastinapur, he kneeled and paid his respects. He asked them what he could do for them. Before anyone could ask him anything, Arjun asked him a blunt question. Who was his guru, and from where had he learnt the art of archery? Eklavya answered with one word: Drona. While the Pandavas stood about wondering how it could be that their teacher Drona had taught this forest dweller, Arjun rode back to Hastinapur to demand answers from Drona. He accused Drona of betraying him and his ambition, but Drona had no knowledge of this mysterious student of his. Upon coming face to face with Eklavya, Drona asked the Nishad boy why he considered him his guru. Eklavya bowed to his teacher and showed him an image of Drona that he had crafted with his own hands. He reminded Drona that once, long ago, he had come to Drona and asked to be accepted as a pupil, and that Drona had refused him, saying he only taught Kshatriyas. Drona was speechless for a moment. Eklavya's thirst for knowledge had not only surpassed Arjun, the Pandav prince, it had also defeated Drona himself. By merely practicing in front of a handcrafted image, Eklavya had made himself into the world's best archer. Drona suppressed the urge to praise Eklavya's devotion. He buried the part of himself that valued fairness and justice. He asked Eklavya for his Guru Dakshina. He demanded that the Nishad boy cut off his right thumb and give it to him. Eklavya did not lose a moment and did as his Guru asked. Drona walked away from the forest, knowing that there was no way Eklavya would be the world's greatest archer without the thumb on his right hand. He took no pleasure in the fact that he had effectively ended the legend that could one day have been Eklavya. Somewhere far from Hastinapur, a young man by the name of Karna lived a humble life with his parents. His father was a Sooth, a charioteer. He knew, however, that he was different somehow, and that he was meant for great things. His body, for example, wore an enchanted armor, and his ears had beautiful golden kundals. He had had these gifts for as long as he could remember. One day, he asked his mother about these gifts and the burning desire in his heart to fight and pursue the life of a Kshatriya. In response, Karna's mother told him the story of how he had come to be in this family. She told him that years ago, his father had found him floating in the river in a basket. He had brought the baby home with him. The armor and the rings on his ears had grown as he had grown into a man. Having thus understood that he was really a Kshatriya, Karna set out to learn the ways of war. He sought out the greatest master of arms he could find, Drona. But Drona told him what he had told Eklavya, that he only taught Kshatriyas. Karna could have told Drona that he was a Kshatriya, but he did not do so because that would mean demeaning the parents who had brought him up. Karna returned home, disheartened, and wept in silence. His parents, who knew he was suffering because he bore the label Sutputra, blamed themselves. But Karna never spoke to them about this. He was, and would remain his entire life, someone who bears his pains in silence. Karna's mother was surprised one morning when he came running to her and spoke breathlessly about having found a teacher. She asked him if the Guru will teach him despite him not being a Kshatriya, and if he would, was he a Guru of repute? Karna answered by saying that this was a Guru beyond any other. His fame spanned ages, and there was no one greater than him in all the realms. And this was also a Guru who would never, not even in 1,000 years, ever teach the art of war to a Kshatriya.
When Karna the Sutputra appeared before legendary avatar of Vishnu and begged to be accepted as his student, the only question Parshuram asked him was if he was a Kshatriya. Every fabric of Karna's being wanted to fight. But he knew why Parshuram asked him this question. In ages past, this Brahmin had picked up his axe and wiped the earth clean of Kshatriyas. Not once, but 21 times. Karna, who had been rejected by all teachers he had approached, told Parshuram that he was not a Kshatriya, but a Brahmin just like him. Parshuram accepted the young man as his disciple. He saw seeds of greatness in Karna and taught him all there was to know about the art of war. Karna learned with eagerness and made himself into one of Parshuram's most illustrious students. Karna quickly became an archer par excellence and learnt the use of devastras which could devastate entire worlds. Parshuram imparted to him knowledge of the highest secrets and the most dangerous ways of fighting. One day, Parshuram was resting in the noonday sun and he laid his head on Karna's thigh. A scorpion emerged from the grass and stung Karna. Karna felt the pain and ignored it so as to not disturb his beloved teacher's nap. When Parshuram awoke and found that Karna was bleeding from the sting, he inquired about it. Karna told him that he had quietly suffered the pain of a scorpion's sting. He was very surprised to see his teacher losing his temper. Parshuram accused Karna of being a Kshatriya. He said that no Brahmin could have remained silent through such pain. Everything Karna said in his defense fell on deaf ears. Parshuram said that Karna had betrayed his trust and drove him out and laid a curse upon him in addition. He said that the day that Karna needs his skills the most, he would forget them.
After the Pandavas and Kauravas learnt all they could from Kripacharya and Drona to test their skills, a tournament was organized so the cousins could exhibit their talents before the royal family and the public. In the tournament, Arjun displayed his extraordinary skills in archery and the use of weapons. All who saw Arjun were lost in admiration and wonder. This was when Karna, who had learnt the art of war from Parshuram himself, appeared before the crowds. He wanted to challenge Arjun's skills. To show his might, Karna performed feats that outshone everything Arjun had done so far. Arjun was greatly insulted. Since Karna was not invited to the tournament, he was refused the title of victor. To prove their strength over Karna, the Pandavas said they were ready to battle him. However, before the battle between the Pandavas and Karna could commence, Kripacharya, the teacher of the Pandavas, stepped in. He announced that a combat could not be staged without knowledge of Karna's lineage. Karna had to be of royal blood to fight the Pandavas. All Karna could tell them about his lineage was that he had been discovered in a basket floating down the river and brought up by a humble charioteer and his wife. As the Pandavas laughed at Karna, what they did not notice was that their mother Kunti had fainted upon hearing this. Surprisingly, it was Duryodhan who stepped in and saved Karna from further humiliation. To make him worthy of challenging the Pandavas, Duryodhan declared Karna the king of Ang, a kingdom under him.
After completing his education, young Drona mastered the art of archery. To learn the art, Draupadi, the son of the king of Panchal, became Drona's fellow student in his hermitage. During the training, the friendship between Drona and Draupadi grew stronger, and they became very close to each other. In his youthful enthusiasm, Draupadi often told Drona that he would give Drona half his kingdom after he became king. Drona, however, never cared much about acquiring wealth. After a few years, when Drona got married, he suffered poverty and wished for wealth for the sake of his wife and little son Ashwathama. Drona then remembered the promise that Draupadi had made to him during his childhood. When Draupadi ascended the throne of Panchal, Drona was confident that Draupadi would treat him generously and would give him a part of his kingdom. Drona went to Panchal and reminded the king of their friendship and the promise that he had made. Draupadi had changed. He was drunk with power and refused to recognize Drona. He denied ever having made such a promise and insulted Drona for daring to appear before him. Drona left the palace in rage and vowed to punish the king for humiliating him. He knew that Draupadi would soon bear the consequences of his action.
The Pandavas had mastered the art of archery and had also excelled in the use of arms. Arjun had become the best archer of them all, while Bhim was the strongest of them all. This made Duryodhan, the eldest of the Kaurava brothers, very jealous of the Pandavas. The people of Hastinapur saw the strength of the Pandavas and started praising them openly. It was an open secret that Yudhishthir, the eldest of the Pandavas, was going to be declared the next king of Hastinapur for his wisdom. When Duryodhan heard of people's love for Yudhishthir, flames of jealousy began to burn his heart. Along with Karna and Shakuni, he devises a fiendish plot to get rid of the 5 brothers. The Kauravas told the Pandavas that a great festival in honor of Lord Shiva will be held at Vanvrat. After Dhritarashtra told the Pandavas that their presence at the festival was important, the Pandavas agreed to go. Before the Pandavas took leave from Hastinapur, Duryodhan sent Purochan to Vanavrat with some very specific instructions. Purochan built a beautiful palace of dry materials that would burn easily. He plastered the walls with flammable materials and placed the beds in the areas that would catch fire easily. Duryodhan's plan was to set the palace of lacquer on fire once the Pandavas had fallen asleep at night. He was counting on the people of Vanvrat to give the Pandavas a warm reception and concluded that no one would suspect any foul play when the burning palace took their lives. Little did he realize that the dastardly plan he had hatched would not remain hidden for long. The goodwill that he had used to trap his cousins would come to their rescue. Before the Pandavas took leave of the elders at Hastinapur, Vidur warned them of the threat that was soon to befall them. He told them that they should be on guard against any kind of attack and should be ready with every possible means of escape. On reaching Vanvrat, the Pandavas were heartily welcomed by the people. There, they resided with the citizens until the construction of the palace was complete. After the palace was complete, the Pandavas moved in. During their stay there, they scanned the palace thoroughly and learned that every corner of the palace was made of combustible material. They quickly realized that the palace was a trap by Duryodhan to kill them. The Pandavas wasted no time planning their escape from Duryodhan's death trap. Knowing that danger lurked around the Pandavas, Vidur sent a talented miner to Vanvrat to meet the Pandavas in secret. The miner worked for many days and dug out a tunnel under the palace with an exit into the forest. All this happened right under Purochan's nose, whose quarters were at the gate of the palace. After the great feast that the Pandavas hosted for all the attendants, Bhim set fire to the palace. The Pandavas, along with Kunti, escaped through the passage unharmed. Everybody thought the fire to be an accident and mourned the loss of the Pandavas and their mother Kunti. When news reached the Kauravas, they considered their job done. But little did they know, their cousins would return from the dead.
As the Pandavas walked through the thick forest, Bhim saw that the constant night vigils and fear of an attack by assassins was taking its toll on his mother Kunti and his brothers. They knew that danger could be lurking around them and that they would have to find a safe place to stay before long. After walking a long distance, Kunti and the Pandavas could hardly walk anymore as they were extremely thirsty and hungry. Seeing their plight, Bhim carried Kunti on his shoulder, took Nakul and Sahadev on his hips and supported Yudhishthir and Arjun with his two hands. Under the dark night sky, Bhim strode effortlessly like an elephant through the thickness of the forest. When the Pandavas reached the river, a boatman who knew their plan received them and helped them cross the river to the other side of the land. On reaching the other side, the Pandavas decided to halt till morning. Of all the Pandavas, Bhim was the one who set out to fetch water for his thirsty mother and brothers. Bhim walked for miles through the dense forest in search of water. When he found a pool, he made bowls with lotus leaves and brought water to his mother and brothers. When all were fast asleep, Bhim stayed awake to guard them. The next morning, the Pandavas began their journey again. Although they suffered much hardship, they did stop. They knew that they would soon avenge the sinister attempts to kill them and make Duryodhan pay for his misdeeds. In the city of Ekchakra, the Pandavas and Kunti disguised themselves as Brahmins so that the Kauravas would not be able to find them. In order to sustain themselves, the Pandavas begged for food in the streets and found themselves shelter in the house of a scholar. One day, when the Pandavas were out begging for food, Kunti heard a loud cry from the scholar's room. When Kunti inquired what the matter was, the scholar informed her about his misfortune. He told her about Bakasur. Many years ago, Bakasur, the cruel Asur, had begun his reign of terror in Ekchakra. He would often come out of his cave and out of hunger, he would indiscriminately kill and eat the dwellers of the city. The dwellers tried reaching a settlement with the Asur by saying that once a week, one person from each house would deliver him large amounts of food in a bullock cart. Bakasur agreed to the proposal, and from that day he had been eating the food, the bullocks, and even the person who delivered the food. The scholar told Kunti that this week it was his turn to deliver food. Since his death would leave his family unprotected, he had decided that all of them would go and lay down their lives together. The scholar also told the Pandavas that no man, however brave, had ever been successful in attempts to killing the Asur. Upon hearing this, Kunti at once proposed that her son Bhim would go and deliver food to the Asur this time. Bhim, who had been itching for a fight for quite some time, was only too happy to obey his mother. Bhim went to the hilltop with a cart full of food. Bakasur smelled him from afar and awoke for his meal. But when Bakasur emerged from his cave, he found that Bhim had already eaten everything the cart contained. Bakasur was enraged. It was not long before a fight to the death broke out between Bakasur and Bhim. Bakasur was large and strong, but Bhim was no less. The son of Vayu broke every single bone in Bakasur's body, thus ending his life. That evening, Ekchakra rejoiced and celebrated. They thanked Bhim for delivering them from the fear of Bakasur. Bhim accepted the gratitude and went to sleep, well fed and content after a long time. Drupad realized that he would soon fall prey to attacks by Drona and his army. To protect himself from enemy attacks, he desired a son who could kill Drona. Drupad organized a yagya and invited sages to offer prayers and grant him a son. When the yagya was over, everybody saw a young boy emerge from the sacred fire. This was the son that Drupad had prayed for. Drupad's son rose from the fire with beautiful garlands on his neck and a sword in his hand. While everybody was celebrating the birth of Drupad's son, they saw another figure emerge from the fire. This time, the figure was that of a girl. From the sacrificial fire, Drupad was blessed with a daughter. Drupad named his son Drishtadyumna and named his daughter Draupadi. It was soon after Draupadi's birth that the sages predicted that the daughter of Drupad will be the cause of the destruction of many Kshatriyas. Years passed and Draupadi grew up to be a young woman whose beauty was unrivaled. When the time came for her to be wed, Drupad organized a grand Swayamvar and invited brave and noble men from across the land.
In Panchal, everybody was preparing for Draupadi's Swayamvar with great excitement. News of the Swayamvar had spread all across the country. Princes and Brahmins alike were preparing for the contest to win Draupadi. Upon hearing the news, the Pandavas decided to attend the Swayamvar and win the hand of the beautiful princess of Panchal. Draupadi's Swayamvar was attended by all the princes of nearby kingdoms, including Duryodhan and the other Kauravas. The Pandavas too attended the Swayamvar disguised as Brahmins. At the Swayamvar, a mighty bow was placed in the middle of the hall. After all the suitors took their seat, Drupad announced the challenge. To win the hand of Draupadi in marriage, one had to watch the reflection of a revolving fish in a bowl of oil and shoot an arrow to penetrate the fish's eye. Of all the talented princes who rose to string the bow, none could even lift the bow as it was too heavy for them. One by one, they all abandoned the quest and returned to their seats humiliated. Even Duryodhan failed to string the bow. When Arjun rose to string the bow, no one expected him to do anything spectacular. What chance did a Brahman have where so many Kshatriyas had failed? To everyone's surprise, Arjun not only lifted the bow, he actually fulfilled Drupad's challenge. He hit the eye of the fish effortlessly, and a stunned silence overtook the court.
The Swayamvar of Draupadi was more than just a ceremony. It was a turning point in the Mahabharata. A point in time where paths of destiny converged and seeds of future devastation were sown. Among the kings who attended the Swayamvar was Karna, the king of Ang, and friend of the Kaurav prince Duryodhan. Though he was handsome to look at and skilled in the use of arms, the taint of being a charioteer's son never left him. When the king of Ang proceeded to the center of the hall to try his hand at the challenge presented by Drupad, it was Draupadi who spoke. And the words she spoke were harsh. She said that a Sutputra had no business being in the presence of kings. She said that regardless of his skills and his kingship, he would never be worthy of the hand of a princess. Thus insulted, Karna returned to his seat. If Draupadi could have seen the fires of humiliation that burned in his eyes, she would have shivered. She would have seen war and desolation that awaited this land in the future. But there were others at the Swayamvar who were not there to marry Draupadi. Krishna was present in the Panchal court with his elder brother Balram. Though he was unmatched as a warrior and was the most beautiful man in the gathering, he did not try to lift the bow or string it or aim at the eye of the fish. In Krishna's eyes was the picture of all that had happened, all that was happening, and all that was about to happen. On his lips was a smile. He cheered when Arjun's arrow found its mark, and he applauded when Draupadi accepted him as her husband. It was a momentous occasion, one that deserved the presence of God himself.
After the Swayamvar was over, the Pandavas set forth on their journey, taking Draupadi to her new home. On their way, the Pandavas were attacked time and again by several hostile local princes, but the 5 brothers fought them all off. Upon reaching their hut, the Pandavas called out for their mother, who at that time was inside praying. When Kunti heard her sons calling to her, she thought they had brought food. Carelessly, the mother of 5 sons said that whatever they had brought, they should share among themselves equally. But when Kunti saw the bride and was told that she was Arjun's wife, she regretted what she had asked her sons to do. Kunti immediately saw that she had made a mistake, but there were other worries on her mind as well. She feared that Draupadi's beauty might cause discord among her sons. To avoid the Pandavas from falling apart, Kunti did not take back her words. Yudhishthir, Bhim, Nakul and Sahadev were hesitant to marry Draupadi as it felt wrong to them. They believed that only Arjun, who had won Draupadi, could be her real husband. As the Pandavas debated with Kunti, a sage who was crossing by appeared. The sage told Kunti that Draupadi, in her previous life, had prayed for a husband with 5 virtues. In this life, she was destined to be the wife of 5 husbands. Upon hearing this, the Pandavas could object no further. They obeyed their mother's orders and married Draupadi. What the Pandavas did not notice was that Drishtadyumna, Draupadi's brother, was witness to this marriage. When he goes back to Drupad and tells him of his daughter's fate, more seeds of war will be sown.
The divine bow was known for its weight. It was gifted by Lord Shiv to Parashuram, who then passed it on to Krishna's ancestors. It is believed that the name Sai was given to him by the people of Shirdi, where he led the life of an ascetic by meditating all day under a neem tree.